President Bola Tinubu has signed a budget of 28.78 trillion naira for the 2024 fiscal year. The president, who returned to the Aso Rock Villa from his Yuletide holiday in Lagos, conducted a brief ceremony to sign the inaugural budget of his administration. The event was witnessed by top government officials, including President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Atiku Bagudu, and the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu. The National Assembly had on Saturday passed the 2024 appropriation bill, increasing its size from the initially proposed 27.5 trillion naira by President Bola Tinubu to 28.7 trillion, while the budget size saw an increase of 1.2 trillion naira. Joining us now is Paul Alaje, an economist from SPM Professionals. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all the viewers around the world.
Yes, indeed. All right, so let's talk about this budget of renewed hope. Looking at the numbers, the figures, the added figures and all of that, does it inspire any hope in you at all, and why should it?
Well, budget proposal that have been prepared now is law. The president have signed it into law, so it's no more a bill, it's now an act, 2024, except and unless we are going to have a review that will come into this. Recall that this morning again, the president had a national broadcast, and he had mentioned that the labor union, I think the federal government workers will be having a review, upward review, I guess, in their monthly salaries. So I'm not sure if that has been captured in this budget. I'm not very sure if it has been captured, but if it is not, then it therefore means that we'll be looking at a supplementary budget in the coming period. So when you look at the budget analysis and you see where the hope lies, we have seen that 1.2 trillion naira has been increased when it goes to the National Assembly, because the Nigerian National Assembly is a National Assembly with a long pause. In Economist, when we say the National Assembly has a long pause, it means they can increase or decrease. They can adjust what the ministry is saying. I've seen there've been a lot of extensive conversation about that. But well, it is the rule here in our country, and it is the law that has been adopted, has been tested even in different areas, and the National Assembly still maintains that as an assembly that has that law. The president submitted 27.5 now, 28.7 is what is passed. And when you look at it critically by breaking it down, to see out of the money we have 8.768 go into recurrent, and you have a large amount that is also going into service, even though service itself is recurrent. I've seen that in the last 6 years, people have started those preparing budget have started removing debt service from recurrent expenditure. Debt service is recurrent expenditure. Economics divides budget into two broad lines: recurrent and capital. Capital expenditure in this budget is 9.995 trillion naira. The remainder, they are recurrent. So you now have recurrent for debt service and recurrent for overhead, salaries, and so on and so forth. So when you remove 9.9 trillion, you see that we still have huge amounts going into recurrent expenditure. Over the years, what we have seen in the last 8 years is between 20 to 30% is what goes to capital expenditure. The remainder has always gone into recurrent. That is between 70 to 79% has gone into recurrent expenditure. When supplementary budget is added, then capital expenditure most of the time is further stifled to about 15%. Because when they submit the supplementary budget, we don't go back to recalculate the proportion of capital expenditure that is in the old budget. So for this capital expenditure that is presented by President, we are looking at over 30%, maybe 34%. I'm not sure. I've not really put pen on capital expenditure. But we need to grow our capital expenditure to 50% and eventually to 60%. And there are ways we can
How do we do it?
We've seen Orosai reports have told us we have an elaborate government side. We have also seen that government has had huge Ministry has been grown to.
Paul, sorry to butt in there. When we keep talking about the Obasanjo report, as brilliant as it is, compared with the time that report was made and now, don't you think a lot, has changed? Nigeria may have moved on from the realities of that time.
That reality has not changed.
It hasn't changed much.
What is our revenue component now? What is our revenue now? Last year, at least the one we can measure, we have done less than 7 trillion. Properly speaking, we have done a little above 5 trillion naira. We are looking at a country that wants to spend in 2024 over 28 trillion naira. If you want to give us money in terms of ways and means, we can only get about 15% of last year's revenue. What will that be? And these are laws. It's been passed by the National Assembly. So when we say that we have not completely departed from our Obasanjo report. In fact, the former central bank governor, Malam Sanusi, has also recommended that report. If the adjustment we can make to the report is fine. But for us to have elaborate civil service, as we say, and you measure that service with how productive the service is in terms of the investment that civil service is helping to drive into Nigeria, you know that it will, of course, hamper our revenue. So there are key sectors that we cannot do anything about. Agencies of government that we can't do anything about, but non-productive one, how do we make them productive? If they are not productive, then why do we have them in the first instance?
The president's giving himself a pat on the back on the issue of, closing up the deficit from 6.11% to 3.88%.
Of what? If you say 6.11%, is it of the entire budget? Now, what was the previous year's budget? So percentage is a function of the amount. You calculate percentage, if you calculate it on previous year's budget, because it was small, so the recurrent, the capital, the debt deficit component, debt service component will be huge, or debt component of the whole budget will be huge. This budget is already large. It's large. It's 28.7%.
Now, but some would say for barely over $30 billion. For an economy like Nigeria.
Yes, it's very small. I'm talking in Naira terms. Now, this budget has not been spent. The last budget originally, when it was passed, it was not that amount. It was when we went for supplementary budget that it increased. We don't know the end of this budget, whether we are going to have supplementary budget or not. But I understand where the president is coming from. If he's taking decision as of now, when we have not seen what the future looks like, then it's easy to say. But when we start spending, when the reality dawns on us, National Assembly have said that, hey, prices have changed. So some of the things that goes to them must also change. The question I ask is, what happens to average Nigeria? Prices have changed for them since June 2023. This is the 7th month counting. What will change for them? Allocation going to National Assembly certainly will change with this budget. But what will change for Nigeria? Are we now going to multiply by 2 all incomes that everybody earns in Nigeria? But there is a condition to that. 28%. That's inflation. Taller than Cocoa House, a 26-story building. So how do we manage that? Because we seem to be peeping into 30.
But aren't you comforted by the fact that the president has said, look, we're going to look at the wages?
I'm comfortable with that. But you see, we also cannot increase wages indefinitely. A number of us have proposed not less than 80, comfortably 100,000 for minimum wage. But that has implication on inflation. And that is why I've encouraged labor leaders, TUC, NUC, all the labor union to quickly engage with government. Don't wait till 3rd of January. 2nd of January, place that call. Mr. President has made this pronouncement. It's a national broadcast. The committee that needs to be set up, government, private sector, and organized labor, they need to come together. How do we start having this? Because this is the top conversation. President said in his broadcast, there is a top conversation on the mouth of many Nigerians as to their living standards. It's a real issue. He has been to Lagos, at least apart from what he's getting in Abuja, he has also gotten from a state, Lagos State, one of the most viable states in Nigeria, that things might not be as easy. And he said, I understand the groaning of Nigerians. I am going to do something about it. And that is, I think, the point of hope that I think Mr. President is saying many Nigerians.
And in addition to that, he actually said he's going to remove some of the key obstacles where, where does it really start from? The key obstacles to, business in Nigeria, both foreign direct investments. You can see that many of them are leaving the country. What are the obstacles it needs to remove very quickly?
Policy environment needs to be correct. Corruption needs to go. Toll gates, the new ones that want to come to Nigeria, we should ensure that they have direct access, maybe to ministers, to governors, to Mr. President himself, the Vice President, or direct appointee of government. All other persons that are not responsible to take action, they may constitute toll gates because they don't know where the true pinch is. So they may now constitute themselves to give us 10%, 20%. The culture of corruption must be taken away. So government must not just try to make effort in going around the world for people to invest in Nigeria. The president must also make available the designated authority for these investors to meet. And when we talk investor, president is meeting nations, going to meetings, meeting people. It may not be those people directly that will come to Nigeria. It could be other people. It could just be somebody that attended one of the meetings that wants to come into Nigeria. It may not have direct access to the president. Presidents all over the world are not very easy to see. Now, but who are they supposed to see? Are we talking to our National Sovereign Investment Agency organization to take this responsibility? Are we talking to debt management office? Are we given that if you want to do investment or you want to support Nigeria with any kind of facility, this is the place to go? And also checking phone numbers of most of these agencies online. Are they functional? Because tests have been done on 2. Numbers were called, they were not reachable. So whether it is New Year or Christmas or any major salad that we have, it must be available per time. This is when it shows that we really mean business as a nation. And what the president is saying,
some would actually say that until Nigeria becomes a 24-hour economy, we may not.
I completely agree. I completely agree.
Paul Alaje, SPM Professionals, thank you so much for joining us, and Happy New Year again.
Happy New Year.